Good morning. Thought I'd give you another video installment. Today we're doing a video on this 1949 Packard Custom 8. It's a 20-second series. Just kind of giving you a little bit of a video about what I do for kind of general routine service practices, at least things that I use. Everyone has their own little regimen of things they do with their car, their collector car, even their modern car. Just thought I'd go over and touch base on some of the things I do, because people do ask. And anyway, give you a look at this particular car anyhow. And some of these things are kind of common for every car, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about, at least today, is going to be specific to at least this Packard, but this can apply to a lot of other cars too, just the same. So just bear that in mind. But anyway, every year, of course, I get this car out. I drive it around in the summertime, put about 500-600 miles on it, maybe 7 at the extreme most. Normally, it doesn't get a whole lot of use. Usually, on average, it's usually between 200 and 300 miles. But there weren't a lot of car shows this year. But the ones that there were that did happen this year, I actually went out and took it out on some fairly lengthy drives, and I've managed to put about 550, 600 miles on it. And by that time, the oil starts to get a bit dirty. And anyway, I like to change it. I like fresh oil in it for the winter, because old oil in a crankcase after a while can get acidic, and it can damage your engine bearings. It can get varnishy, cause all kinds of problems later on. You don't want to do that. So I change my oil once a year, every year in it. And anyway, what we do here, of course, obviously jack up the car, and you want to do this with the engine fully warmed up. Like, just get it good and take it out and run it around and get it warmed up good. Let it cool for a few minutes, obviously, but not too long. You still want it pretty hot when you change it, because that oil's in the dirt and everything is in suspension in the oil, and with the oil that hot, it will flow very nicely coming out of the engine. But let it sit a few minutes so it's not going to burn you. You don't want to get burned doing it. You got to be careful. Once the oil, of course, is drained, you put the plug back in, make sure it's tight. Then I get out 2 plastic bags. One I cover with the generator up with to make sure I don't get oil all over it, and 2 for the oil filter that I take out of the canister. Take the lid off and pull it out, and then once it's out of there, I use these long transmission funnels for a lot of things. One thing I found they're really handy for, you crack this, there's a little drain plug on the bottom of this thing right there. I'll take and crack that loose just to the point where I can move it with my fingers, and then I get my long funnel underneath of it and position it, and I take the plug the rest of the way out, and I have that funnel aimed so that the oil will go in the pan, the drain pan under the car. And that's how I get mine out. Some people use the turkey baster to suck all the oil out of there. You can do that too. This way it just gets it all out, and I don't have to put my hands down in it when it comes time to get into wiping it out. And you want to wipe it out nice and clean and dry with a bunch of clean paper towels. And then I refill, of course, fill it back up with new oil. And as far as oil is concerned, as far as the oil that I use, usually Rotella T 15W40 or Napa 15W40. They just happen to give me a really killer deal. Of course, I'm quite a regular customer at Napa, so I have a commercial account there, so they set me up with a good price on oil, and their oil is good oil too. I use it in my modern cars. I use it in my old cars. If you want to plug out for Napa. Of course, a new filter. And then the oil that I use, it's a 15W40 detergent oil, and anyone with a 356 engine knows, or any Packard straight 8 with hydraulic valve lifters knows, do not run non-detergent motor oil in them, ever. Matter of fact, I won't run non-detergent motor oil in any engine I own, especially if it's a pressurized oiling system with modern insert bearings, which is Packard's pretty much after about 1937, all of them had insert bearings throughout, so they're really a modern engine internally. And those little tiny oil orifice tubes in the lifters, they're really, 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 really small. They're real tiny. They can plug easy So you want to keep your oil clean, and you want to use a detergent oil, not a non-detergent oil. And I actually not only will fill the crankcase up with a good quality oil, I also add more detergent, and it's also an oil stabilizer, and that's a full quart of Rizlone with it. And that helps keep the oil stabilized, especially for winter storage. I don't get any problems with varnishes or oil breakdown or anything like that. I've never had problems with this car as far as lifter noise. And I was lucky with this car. It was a one-owner car that was very well cared for up to the point it's set in storage. And it was obvious when I opened up the engine that it had been maintained regularly. There was no sludge in there. It was actually looked like a brand new engine inside. You could still see the paint stripes on the valve springs. But kind of at least that. And then the next thing I do, and this is to go along with winter preparation, and you should do this not just with your collector car, your modern car too, is you go down to the parts store, squeeze the stuff out of it, pick yourself up one of these antifreeze testers. They're only a few dollars. And put that down in the radiator. And give it a squeeze. You gotta kind of get it in there so it'll pick up the coolant. There we go. And you squeeze the ball and it'll fill it up. And it'll tell you how much antifreeze protection you have. In the case of this, we're about minus 20, minus 30, which for my climate is good. Anything much below, you want at least a minimum, bar none minimum of 15 below when you're using antifreeze. Some guys like to put just straight water in their engines, and that's really not a good thing to do either, because that water can lay in, even if you drain your water out every year for winter storage, it still has water laying in the bottom of the block, and it can still freeze, creep, and potentially crack an engine. You still want to pour antifreeze in it. As a matter of fact, I run almost no water mixed into my coolant. It's a little harder on the water pump to turn, but it won't freeze and it won't boil easily. But and it also helps keep the corrosion down. I also put a corrosion inhibitor in my coolant as well to keep it down. But this car does need a new radiator, and then when that radiator comes out, I'm actually going to pull the head gasket, pull the freeze plugs, clean it out real good, make sure the water pump's good. I'm going to do a cooling system overhaul, and it'll get converted over to the Evans waterless coolant when I do this. But that'll be a subject for another video at another time. But anyway, like I said, you put your tester in there, check it. And the nice thing about this type of tester, because it's clear plastic, you can see through it. You can also see how clean your coolant is. If it's all brown and kind of bad, you may want to drain it out, flush it, and change it. You don't want clogged up cooling passages, because that can lead to, of course, overheating and potentially a breakdown or even engine damage. And none of those things sound like fun, and nor are cheap. So nobody wants unwanted damage. So, but anyway, that's some of the things I do there. And I do that every year. Talking about winter storage, my cars usually sit about 5 to 6 months on run, or not necessarily on run, but I'll say unmoved. But they do get moved in and around in the garage, because I do sometimes have to get the things. So they get started up almost on a pretty regular, somewhat basis. But one thing I do, I take the battery. Usually I take the battery out, and I've got a shelf in here, and my garage is climate controlled. This car actually sits in another building that is well insulated, but it's not heated. And I bring the battery home and keep it here in a nice stable climate. That keeps my battery, actually makes my batteries last a lot longer. But you want to, if you leave the battery in, that's okay. I would actually recommend pulling it out, because sometimes over time condensation can develop. It can also pull any of the acids off the top, and it can run down, and it can corrode the oil, corrode the battery trays and things like that. But if you leave your battery in and it's a pretty stable environment, generally you're probably okay. But you want to disconnect it. Do not leave it connected. You never know. You never know. A little rodent can get in the garage, and I've seen this happen, to chew up a wire, something shorts out. It could catch the car on fire. You never know, but it's the good practice when you're going to leave it for a long period of time. Just disconnect it. Plus, it'll keep the battery from wanting to slowly discharge itself through to ground. And then, of course, the next thing I do, of course, you want to put a fuel stabilizer in your gas. And I typically, I use actually just this product here. It's called Seafoam. You can get this at just about any good chain parts store. Some gas stations have it, some don't, but you can get it just about anywhere. Walmart, any of the chain stores, any of those kind of places. Anyway, I pour the whole bottle in the tank, and then I fill the tank full right before I take it over to put it away. Usually I run it around and run the gas down out of it so it's pretty low. That way I have a full tank of fresh gas on top of that Seafoam. And it's also a good product to use in your modern car if you live in a cold climate. You can use this in a warm climate too. I put that, in the wintertime especially, I use a bottle of that Seafoam in my modern car every other tank full when it's really cold out. Usually every 2 to 3 tankfuls, and that keeps my gas good. And with my old cars, come springtime when I want to get them out, my batteries, usually I check the battery on the charger real quick to make sure it's up to snuff. I'll put it back in. I hit the key, and usually it just takes right off and starts just like I drove it yesterday. I've never had a problem using that. But if you're going to store a car for an incredibly long period of time, let's say you're going to store it for, let's say, a year, you may want to drain the tank and have the tank completely empty, bone empty, and maybe put a little bit of Marvel's Mystery Oil in the bottom of the pour a quart in the tank to kind of help coat the bottom of the tank. One, with an oil product. Two, you can chase that any varnish out. You want to make sure you get it pumped out real good. If you're going to store for a really long period of time, you don't want gas in the tank. But for just 6 months for the winter, you'll want a full tank. That keeps the condensation from being able to build up in the tank, causing rust and deposits and things that can clog up fuel lines and carburetors. And of course, that's no good for a lot of things. But anyway, that's kind of some of the things I do. Some people like to put their cars up on jack stands. I actually don't put mine on stands, only because I know that, one, they're not sitting there, well, they're sitting there 6 months, and that can flat spot tires after a while, and it does a little bit, especially bias tires. But sometimes I have to get in the garage and move things around to get to something else. Maybe I'll have a winter project I'm going to do, and I got to move cars around. So it's kind of a hassle. I just rather that they're almost ready to go. And the following thing I have to do is put the battery back in, start it up, and move it. I can do it. But jack stands is a good idea. But anyway, that's just kind of the gist of today's video. Some basic maintenance and kind of winter prep things. But and if I missed anything, or you have any of your own suggestions you want to share with us all out here in YouTube land or internet land, just put them in the comments section. And if you like the video, please hit the like button. And if you really like it, please hit the subscribe button. I'm going to try to, over time, put more and more videos out. I'm not the world's best videographer here, but I do the best I can with the equipment that I have, which is nothing more than a smartphone camera. But anyway, with that, I'm going to be signing off. And thanks, and have a great day. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.